Welcome into another edition of The Current Report, our weekly roundup of what's happening in the world of digital media. I'm your host, Chris Brooklier. TikTok on the clock. Thankfully, for the Chinese-owned app, the party didn't stop in the US, as President Trump signed an executive order to keep it active for the next 75 days. Still, marketers are strategizing to figure out their next move in case TikTok does go dark in the US. eMarketer projects that in the event a TikTok ban is enforced, 50% of reallocated US ad spend could shift to Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, with the other 50% going to streaming TV, other social media platforms, and even digital out-of-home. To get more perspective, I'm bringing on Michelle Castillo, who's been covering the TikTok story for The Current. All right, pleased to be joined by Michelle. Welcome back to the show. Your illustrious return in 2025. How's it going?
Thanks for having me. Glad to talk TikTok. I feel like we've been talking TikTok the past few years. They did come, the ban did happen. They were gone for a little bit. They did come back, but their future's still a little bit murky.
It definitely seems like that. It was very unclear. I was actually out with a friend when TikTok got shut down, and it was a big deal. I think the number one thing, at least for our audience, right, is where's the spend going to go? So from the people that you talked to and the research that you looked at, what's the biggest insight that you have?
Well, I thought this was really interesting. So I spoke to eMarketer, who was also asked that same question, where's the spend going to go? And I think the obvious answer is competitive social media platforms like Meta, which has Instagram Reels and Facebook Reels. You have YouTube with YouTube Shorts, even to an extent Snapchat. But what really surprised me, and I think surprised them, was the fact that they actually saw that every platform was going to get a boost from TikTok going away and that ad spend being distributed. So if you think about it, they predict that adults 18 to 54 spend about 51 minutes per day on TikTok. If TikTok went away, you're going to have an extra hour added to your life. So that doesn't mean you're going to all spend it on Reels or similar short form video. It means it can go to other places. Like, think about CTV. They were predicting that 12.9% of TikTok's ad dollars could go to CTV. And other social media platforms that might not be as obvious could stand to get another 18.3% piece. I was on TikTok in its quote-unquote final days before it came back, and I saw a big movement of people wanting to go to LinkedIn and start their TikTok presence.
Yeah, the diversification aspect is clearly a huge one, right? I mean, although it would be kind of wild if people moved into LinkedIn. I know there's LinkedIn influencers, but I'm thinking about, and I know TikTok is not just this, like LinkedIn dancing.
Yeah, I mean, news of the day dances. I mean, I've seen weirder things online, but maybe that's where people were thinking. But yes, there was this huge movement, like, let's just all go to LinkedIn, which I think would be hilarious. And I'm sure Microsoft would be happy about the movement of ad dollars there, but I don't know if that's exactly what LinkedIn was meant to be for.
LinkedIn has put in a lot of work in the last year to become more of a video-first platform. So I think this would be, a great step for them if people started putting more on video on there.
Definitely, and it would be a new audience, also new younger entrepreneurials who are in the Gen Z, Gen Alpha stage. I mean, there are some natural fits if you think about, there's a lot of small businesses that use TikTok. There's a lot of financial advice that is given on TikTok that could have a better fit on LinkedIn. I can see it happening there. But yeah, I don't know about the dances and the other memes that might just be more pure entertainment.
You do see a lot of like day in the life of me, I'm a worker, and that could fit onto LinkedIn for sure. I wanted to go back to you just to put a pin on the diversification. You mentioned, as it was your final quote in the story, of like, if you think some marketing channel is the holy grail, you can't put all your eggs in that basket, right? Because just like TikTok, the foundation could be shaky. And I feel like that's a great message to hold.
I think that's what people are learning. So whether or not TikTok gets banned, whether or not they do get another buyer in the US and decide to have a 50% ownership stake with them, that remains to be seen. But what it's teaching you is that any platform could really go away at any point. trends come and go. I was thinking about other platforms that have been really popular in the past. Remember when House Party was a big thing and all those other apps. And if you invest in those platforms when they're buzzy, that's great. But if you put all your money in that, once those things go away, you're kind of left with nothing. Like now, TikTok content, you can move to other platforms. It's easily portable to things like Instagram Reels. But at the same time, if you're just building an audience there and it goes away, you're kind of left at square one from when it's gone, and you don't really have the difference in audiences. We know that there's a lot of shared audiences between TikTok and some other social platforms. For example, Instagram and TikTok share a lot of users, but at the same time, you are getting a different audience, maybe a little older audience on Instagram. You might be getting a more international audience on things like Pinterest. So it isn't really smart to always put your eggs in one basket. And I think this TikTok lesson is teaching that to a lot of brands.
Yeah, according to the eMarketer projections, it was Instagram was slated to get 22% of the ad spend. Although one of the agencies that you talked with, their EVP of paid social said he thought that 70 or 80% of the ad spend would go to IG and Facebook, that's a lot.
Yeah, and I do think it's because it was the most similar platform. Instagram Reels and TikTok is very similar in a way. So it's easier to just move content over. The creators don't have to come up with new formats. A lot of the trends that happen on TikTok also pick up on Instagram. The one thing that I think is something you shouldn't sleep on was definitely YouTube. So some people had pointed out that YouTube Shorts might be one of the biggest beneficiaries of TikTok going away. So I spoke to Curiosity creative director Anthony Trimpe, and he mentioned that one benefit of YouTube Shorts is the fact that it's tied to YouTube, and we know that Gen Z uses YouTube as a search engine more than they even use Google and sometimes. And according to Adobe, 2 out of 5 Americans were already using TikTok as their search engine. So not only would you get the benefit of that social media boost, you might also get some of that search traffic interest if you went to something like YouTube Shorts. So might not be the most obvious, but it is very similar again in format, and also you get added boosts from being in that ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can only go off of what people younger than us are doing, right? And my 12-year-old nephew, his mom doesn't let him have TikTok. So he was just, when I visited him, he was just in the living room watching YouTube Shorts on the TV, which kind of shocked me. I was like, I don't know anyone who watches these. Okay, I think it's easy to think of this as a U.S. issue, right? You know, especially we're both in America. But TikTok can still exist outside of the U.S., right? You know, TikTok is the most, according to the New York Times, the most profitable market in the world. About $10 billion of TikTok's revenue came from the U.S., but they estimated that about $20 to $26 billion globally comes everywhere. So from the people that you were speaking with, what do they think about the global impact of this? Like, are they going to be lessening on their strategy because it could leave the U.S., or are they realizing that the world is bigger?
Well, I did speak to one creator called Intrepid Travel, as I mentioned earlier, and they told me that they're not going to give up on TikTok right away until they see evidence that they should. They pointed out that they're a travel group and they're still very popular overseas in Europe and Canada, which has TikTok. Content that you make for TikTok can easily be put on other social media platforms in that short form video format. So it doesn't make sense to really not make content for TikTok right away. And I think one of the trends that popped up on TikTok when there was a ban in the US, I don't know if you had heard about this, but a lot of the TikTok creators and commenters were kind of making fun of the fact Americans weren't on the platform anymore. They said it's like the loudest kids in the classroom have left. So there's still a huge community on TikTok outside of the US. So for a lot of these global brands, it doesn't make sense to fully pull money or to move a lot of budgets because you're still getting that audience, and that algorithm is still, for the most part, not really as replicable as people want you to believe. a lot of people are still saying they get a bigger boost on TikTok without putting those marketing dollars in. And on top of that, the ever addicting TikTok shop is just great for online sales. I have to admit, I shop a lot on TikTok shop. Sometimes the products are just as advertised. Sometimes they're a little weird, but I think that if you completely leave that ecosystem just because the US left that ecosystem, you might be missing out on that global audience. So I don't think we're going to see that many people shift away, especially because it does seem that the Trump administration seems more likely to be able to want to work with keeping TikTok in the US. Although it's interesting because they were the ones who initiated the talks to look at TikTok as a national security problem.
Definitely. All right. Well, you had a great story. I felt like I learned some stuff out of it. Thank you again for joining the show.
Thanks for having me. Talk to you soon.
Next, we're capping off this episode with one last thing. TV measurement could potentially be in a landmark moment. At least that's what Nielsen thinks, as they recently got accreditation from the Media Rating Council for its panel plus big data measurement, which Nielsen's CEO says gives the industry the most accurate measurement in the history of TV. Nielsen is the first ratings provider to earn approval for this type of tech. The measurement matches traditional panels, which cover around 100,000 households, along with 75 million digital devices like smart TVs. That combination meshes granular data from digital beyond demographic data that comes with panels. Nielsen hopes clients will incorporate this type of measurement into their upfront buying strategies. And that's it for this edition of The Current Report. For a deeper dive on all these stories plus more, check out thecurrent.com. And of course, please like and subscribe on YouTube, plus leave us a review on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen. And if you want to hear more from The Current, listen to The Current Podcast, where we interview some of marketing's biggest leaders about their keystone career moments and where the industry is going next. We'll see you next week.